My name is Michael Reynolds. I'm 38 years old and I live in Columbus, Ohio. For most of my life, I believed that if you loved your family enough, they would never intentionally destroy you. I was wrong. Before I tell you what happened, I want you to remember one thing. The people who know exactly where your heart is also know exactly where to hurt you. If you enjoy emotional family stories about betrayal, secrets, forgiveness, and unexpected consequences, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue telling stories like this. Now let me take you back to the morning when my entire life changed. It was a Tuesday in October. I remember the date because I had been planning something important for almost 3 years. I had saved nearly $500,000. Not from some lottery, not from inheritance, not from a lucky investment. I worked for it. I started saving when I was 23. I took extra shifts. I drove an old Honda for 11 years. I lived in a small apartment even when I could afford something better. Every bonus went into savings. Every tax refund. Every side job payment. I even turned down vacations because I kept telling myself, someday this money will buy me freedom. And finally, I was close. I wanted to buy a small house outside Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing enormous. Just a quiet place with a backyard, a workshop, and enough room for my mother to visit whenever she wanted. My mother, Linda, had raised me after my father died, and my younger sister, Jessica, had always been the person I felt responsible for. That was my mistake. I trusted them more than I trusted myself. That Tuesday morning, I woke up at 6:40, I made coffee, I checked my phone, and I saw an email from my mother. The subject line said, "Michael, please don't hate us." I almost deleted it. But something about those words made my stomach tight. I opened it. There were only 3 paragraphs. The first said they were sorry. The second said they had made a decision they believed was necessary. Then I read the final paragraph. And I swear I stopped breathing. My mother wrote, "Jessica and I took the money. We are in Hawaii. Please don't try to find us." I stared at the screen. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, because my brain refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. I opened my banking app. The balance was almost zero. Nearly $500,000 was gone. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered. She didn't say hello. She simply whispered, "Michael, please listen before you do anything." I said, "Mom, where is my money?" Silence. Then she said something that made the betrayal even worse. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I asked her what that meant. She started crying. And then Jessica came on the phone. My sister said, "Michael, we didn't steal your money." I looked at the empty account. And I replied, "Then why is every dollar gone?" Jessica didn't answer because she knew the truth. And within the next 24 hours, I was going to discover that the $500,000 wasn't even the biggest secret my family had been hiding from me. I immediately called my bank. I explained that I believed my account had been accessed without my permission. The bank representative froze the remaining accounts and started an investigation. Then she asked me a question. "Mr. Reynolds, do you recognize these transfers?" She read them to me, one transfer, then another, then another. The money had been moved over several weeks. Some transfers went to accounts I didn't recognize. Others went to a company I had never heard of, and the final amount had been wired into an account connected to a property purchase. I felt sick. I asked, "Who authorized these?" The representative paused. Then she said, "According to our records, the authorization came through credentials associated with you." My heart dropped. I had never authorized them. But then I remembered something. 2 years earlier, when my mother had needed help managing her medical bills, I had given her access to one of my old financial accounts. I trusted her. I had forgotten that the account was connected to several other financial services. I called my mother again. This time, she answered immediately. I said, "You didn't just take my money, did you?" She cried, "I'm sorry. Where is it?" "It's safe," I almost screamed. "Safe, my money is gone." Jessica took the phone. "Michael, stop acting like we're criminals." I said, "You stole $500,000. She replied, "We saved you." That sentence confused me. Saved me from what? Neither of them answered. Finally, my mother said, "From making the biggest mistake of your life." I asked her what she meant. She said, "You were going to spend everything on that house." I couldn't believe it. "So you stole my money because you didn't like my decision?" Jessica said, "It wasn't just about the house." I asked, "Then what was it about?" Silence. Then Jessica said, "You don't know what happened after Dad died." My entire body went cold. My father had died when I was 18. For 20 years, my family had told me the same story. He had been sick. He had made financial mistakes. He had left behind debts. My mother had struggled to keep the family together. I had accepted that story without question. But Jessica's voice sounded different, like she had been carrying something heavy for years. I said, "What don't I know?" She whispered, "Dad didn't leave us broke." Then the call ended. I sat at my kitchen table for almost an hour. I couldn't think. My father hadn't left us broke. Then where had the money gone? And why would my mother and sister steal my savings because of something that happened 20 years ago? That afternoon, I drove to my mother's house. The house was empty. Her closet was nearly cleared. Jessica's room was empty too. They had planned everything. This wasn't an emotional decision. It wasn't an accident. They had been preparing to disappear. On the kitchen counter, I found a small envelope with my name written on it. Inside was a photograph of my father. On the back, there was a handwritten sentence. "Your father wanted you to know the truth." I sat down on the kitchen floor. For the first time in my life, I wondered whether the two people I trusted most had spent 20 years lying to me. And I knew I couldn't just wait for them to come home. I had to find the truth. The next morning, I contacted an attorney. Her name was Rebecca Miller. She told me something I didn't want to hear. "Michael, don't confront them again." Why? Because right now, you don't know what you're dealing with. She reviewed the bank records. She looked at the transfers. Then she looked at the photograph of my father. "Where did you get this?" "My mother's house." Rebecca turned the photograph over. She read the sentence. Then she looked at me. "Did your father own a business?" "Yes." "What happened to it?" I told her what I'd always been told. It had failed. She shook her head. "No." She pulled up an old business registry. My father's company had not simply failed. It had been sold for a substantial amount of money. Money that had disappeared shortly after his death. Rebecca asked, "Who controlled the company after he died?" I already knew the answer, my mother. But there was another name on the documents. My mother's brother. My uncle Robert. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 15 years. Rebecca told me to contact him. I found his number through an old family contact. He answered on the fourth ring. When I said my name, he went quiet. Then he said, "Michael, I was wondering when you'd finally find out." Those words hit me harder than anything else. I asked him what he knew. He told me my father had been planning to leave the family business to me when I turned 25. But after my father's death, my mother had been overwhelmed. She had debts. Jessica had medical problems as a child, and my mother was terrified of losing the house. Robert said he had helped her sell the business. But there was something else. My father had left money in a separate investment account. A significant amount. That account was supposed to be divided between my sister and me when we became adults. I had never received anything. I asked, "How much?" Robert sighed. "More than enough to explain the $500,000. I couldn't speak. He continued, "Your mother used some of it over the years." For what? To keep the family afloat. That part hurt, but I could understand it. Parents sometimes make desperate decisions. Then Robert said, "But Jessica knows something you don't." "What?" "Your mother wasn't the one who planned the Hawaii move." My stomach tightened. "Who did?" he said. "Jessica?" I couldn't believe it. My sister had always acted like the innocent one, the younger daughter, the person I had protected, the person I had helped financially. Robert told me Jessica had been struggling with serious debt. She had accumulated loans, credit card balances, and private debts. She had convinced my mother that if they could take my savings, move somewhere far away, and start over, everything would eventually work out. But why Hawaii? Robert said Jessica had become obsessed with the idea of starting a new life there. She had found a property. She believed they could disappear. Then he said something that made me realize how deeply the betrayal went. Michael, your mother didn't want to steal from you. I said, she did. He replied, she thought she was protecting Jessica. I closed my eyes. There it was, the truth. My mother had chosen my sister. Again. And suddenly, memories from childhood started making sense. Jessica got the new car. I got the used one. Jessica got help with college. I worked 2 jobs. Jessica's mistakes were forgiven. Mine were remembered, but I still didn't hate my sister. That was the strangest part. I was angry, devastated, humiliated. But somewhere underneath all of that, I still remembered the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I couldn't understand how that little girl had become someone capable of stealing my future. Then Rebecca called me. She said, Michael, we found where the money went. I asked, where? She replied, most of it is tied to a property in Hawaii. And suddenly I knew they hadn't just taken my money. They had bought themselves a new life with it. I didn't go to Hawaii to fight my mother. I didn't go there to hurt Jessica. I went because I needed answers. Rebecca had already begun the legal process. The bank investigation was active. And because the money had moved through accounts connected to me without proper authorization, there were serious questions about whether the transfers were legal. I booked a flight. When I landed in Honolulu, I felt strangely calm. Maybe because I had spent several days being angry. Maybe because anger eventually gets tired. I found the property. It was beautiful, a small house overlooking the ocean. For a moment, I just stood there. Then I saw my mother outside. She looked older, much older. She froze when she saw me. Jessica came out behind her. She stared at me. Nobody spoke. Finally, Mom whispered, you came. I said, I had to. Jessica crossed her arms. You shouldn't be here. I looked at her. You took my money. She said, we needed it. I replied, you needed it more than I did? She looked away. My mother started crying. Michael, I thought I could fix everything. I asked, by destroying me? She shook her head. No. Then what? She said, I was afraid. I sat down on the porch. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten them. I simply asked, why didn't you ask me? My mother looked at me because she didn't have an answer. That was the hardest part. If they had asked me for help, I would probably have given it. I had spent my entire adult life helping them, but they didn't trust my kindness. They trusted my bank account. Jessica finally admitted the truth. She had massive debt. She had lost money in a failed business. She was facing foreclosure. She was terrified. And when she discovered how much I had saved, she convinced herself that I owed the family. Then she convinced Mom. I asked, did Dad's money really exist? Mom nodded. Yes. How much? She looked down. Almost $300,000. I felt like the ground disappeared. Where is it? It's gone. On what? She started crying. Your sister. Jessica looked furious. Mom, but I stopped her. No, let her talk. My mother told me that after my father died, she used some of the money for bills, then more for Jessica, then more to cover Jessica's mistakes. Eventually, almost everything was gone. And every time they needed money, I stepped in. I had unknowingly replaced the money my father left behind. My entire savings account had become the family's emergency fund, but I never agreed to that. I looked at Jessica. Do you know what hurts the most? She didn't answer. It isn't the money. I touched my chest. You took away my ability to trust my own family. Jessica started crying. For the first time since I arrived, she looked like my little sister again. She said, I thought you would forgive me. I replied, I might. She looked at me. But forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences. My mother reached for my hand. I moved back, not because I hated her, because I needed her to understand that love had boundaries. That evening, I left the house. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to destroy my family just because they had hurt me. I was going to let the truth decide what happened. The next morning, Rebecca called. The bank had identified several suspicious transactions. Some of the money had already been spent, but a large portion remained connected to the property. There was enough evidence to pursue recovery. Then Rebecca asked me, "Do you want to press criminal charges?" That question stayed with me. For hours, I could have said yes, and nobody would have blamed me. My mother and sister had betrayed me. They had stolen money I had worked for nearly 15 years to save. But revenge wasn't what I wanted. I wanted my life back, so I told Rebecca, "I want the money recovered." "And the charges?" I said. "Let the investigation determine what happens." That distinction mattered. I wasn't going to lie for them, but I also wasn't going to manipulate the law to punish them. We eventually reached a legal agreement. The property would be sold. The remaining money would be returned. My mother would have to repay what she had personally taken. Jessica would have to take responsibility for her debts herself. There would be no more secret accounts. No more financial favors. No more rescuing people from consequences. When I told them, Jessica cried. She asked, "Does this mean we're finished?" I looked at her. "I don't know." She nodded. For once, she didn't argue. She didn't manipulate me. She didn't ask for another chance. She simply said, "I understand." The house in Hawaii was sold. Some of my money came back, not all of it. I lost a significant amount, but something unexpected happened. My mother began working again. She took a small apartment. She stopped asking me for money. Jessica entered a repayment program and started working 2 jobs. For the first time in her life, she had to solve her own problems. And I went home. I didn't buy the house in North Carolina. Not yet. Instead, I rented a small place near a lake. I bought an old pickup truck, and I started rebuilding my life. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I went through my father's old belongings. I found a box that my mother had kept in storage. Inside were photographs, letters, receipts, and one handwritten letter addressed to me. It had been written years before my father died. I opened it with shaking hands. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. He wrote about life, about mistakes, about money. But near the end, there was one sentence I will never forget. He wrote, "Michael, never confuse loving someone with carrying their entire life on your back." I read that sentence 3 times. Then I cried. Not because of the $500,000. Because I finally understood something my father had tried to teach me before I was old enough to understand it. Helping someone is love. Allowing someone to destroy you is not. 6 months passed. I didn't speak to my mother much. At first, I thought that meant our relationship was over. Then one Sunday afternoon, I received a text. It said, "Can I come see you?" I stared at it for several minutes. Then I replied, "Yes." She arrived an hour later. She brought no gifts, no excuses, no requests. Just herself. We sat at the kitchen table. She looked nervous. Then she said, "I've spent my whole life thinking protecting my children meant fixing their problems." I didn't interrupt. She continued, "I protected Jessica from consequences." She looked at me, "And I made you pay for it." I nodded. She started crying. "I am sorry." For years, I had imagined what I would say if my mother ever apologized. I thought I would give some powerful speech. I thought I would make her feel the pain I felt. But when the moment actually came, I had nothing dramatic to say. I simply told her, "I believe you're sorry." She looked surprised. "But I need time." She nodded. "I understand." That was the beginning, not forgiveness. Not forgetting, just the beginning. Jessica took longer. She called me nearly a year later. She said, "I got another job." I laughed. "That's good." She said, "I paid off another debt." I said, "That's even better." Then there was silence. Finally she asked, "Do you still hate me?" I looked out the window. "No," she started crying. "But I don't trust you yet," she said. I know, and that was enough. Over time, things changed. Not back to the way they were, something better, more honest. We stopped pretending everything was okay. We talked about money. We talked about Dad. We talked about resentment. We talked about the years when I felt invisible. And my mother finally admitted something that changed how I saw my childhood. She said, "I always thought you were strong enough to handle anything." I told her, "Being strong doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." She cried, I cried too. But this time, the tears didn't feel like defeat. They felt like release. Today, I still haven't recovered every dollar, but I recovered something more important. My independence, my boundaries, and my ability to decide who I want in my life. I eventually bought a small house. Not in Hawaii, not in North Carolina. I bought it in a quiet town where nobody knew my family story. The backyard isn't huge. The house isn't perfect. But every morning, I sit outside with my coffee and think about how close I came to losing everything. Sometimes people ask me, would you do anything differently? Yes, I would have helped my family, but I would have helped them with boundaries. I would have asked questions. I would have checked my accounts. And most importantly, I would have understood that love does not require you to surrender everything you have. My mother and sister didn't destroy my life. They changed it. They taught me that family isn't simply about blood. Family is about honesty, respect, accountability, and knowing when to say, I love you, but I will not allow you to hurt me anymore. The $500,000 was money. It took years to build, and losing part of it hurt. But money can be earned again. Trust takes much longer. And sometimes the hardest lesson in life is realizing that the people you would save without hesitation may not save you when you need them. Still, I don't regret loving my family. I only regret believing that love meant ignoring the truth. Today, my mother and I speak every week. Jessica and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. There are still awkward moments. There are still things we don't talk about, but we're trying. And maybe that's what real family looks like. Not perfect, not painless, just honest. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't watching the people who hurt you suffer. Sometimes the greatest revenge is building a peaceful life they can no longer control. And that is exactly what I did.